What if humanity's greatest discovery was never revealed to the public? Imagine for a moment that while scientists simulate life conditions on Mars and space agencies share low-resolution images of the red planet, the most shocking truth has already been discovered and buried. What if NASA, a symbol of science and space exploration, has already found extraterrestrial life on Mars and deliberately hid it all from us? This possibility is no longer fiction. It's a real enigma that hangs like a shadow over decades of silent missions, incomplete archives and manipulated images. Mars has always been a mystery. Since the first probes, something in that desert of dust and rocks caused more doubts than certainties. Craters with unusual symmetry, formations that resemble artificial constructions, and unexplained variations in soil data. And even in the face of so many signs, the official response was always the same: silence, denial, cold explanations that do not satisfy even the most curious layman. But behind that curtain lies a secret that could change everything we believe about life, the universe, and our place in it. Some leaked images from missions like Curiosity and Opportunity show structures that resemble fossils, partially buried metallic fragments, and even shadows that do not correspond to any visible rock. There are videos that circulated for hours before disappearing, prints of NASA instruments detecting methane, a gas that, on Earth, is almost always the result of biological activity. And you know what's most disturbing? This data was one by one denied, archived, or simply deleted. For years, independent scientists have been reporting that the signals were there. They were ignored, ridiculed, or silenced. Decades-old astrobiologists who saw their reputations destroyed for saying they detected plausible evidence of microbial life. And even when NASA itself discreetly admitted the existence of traces of liquid water on Mars, an essential element for life, the news was treated as secondary, because the focus was never on revealing, it was on containing. Now imagine what that means. All of humanity is debating the possibility of life outside Earth, while space agencies have been analyzing Martian organisms for decades. What's more, what if this discovery not only confirmed microbial life, but revealed something much bigger? Something that couldn't be shared without causing global chaos. We're not just talking about science, we are talking about power, control over the truth, and the decision to hide from billions of people. A reality that redefines what it is to be human. And it is at this point that the tracks begin to cross. Leaked documents, registered patents for equipment that was never announced to the public, insider reports and encrypted messages lost in public reports. Everything indicates that NASA not only knows, but has been keeping it secret for much longer than we realize. And now that the truth begins to emerge more clearly, an inevitable question arises. What else is still being hidden behind NASA's clean and smiling broadcasts? What goes on behind the scenes of space missions that are never shown to the public? Every omitted detail, every confidential file, every blurred image, it all points to something much bigger. The pattern is always the same. When evidence gets out of control, it disappears. When someone questions too much, they are discredited. When something different appears in an image of Mars, an explanation quickly emerges that doesn't convince even whoever invented it. Now think about this. Why is so much data released to the public without context? Why do high-definition images take so long to be released? And more importantly, why do experts themselves avoid talking about certain subjects as if they had signed a pact of silence? Perhaps life on Mars has already been discovered. Perhaps they have already encountered intelligent, albeit primitive, life forms. Or perhaps they found signs of an earlier civilization. This would explain the rush to install stations, send robots, and map underground regions. It's not just scientific curiosity, it's a race for what has already been found, but never revealed. And that's when you enter. Your perception, your reading of the signs, matters. Because if there is an audience that can see what is behind the veil, that audience is the one here now. So, comment below. They knew all along. This sentence is not just an opinion. It's a mark of someone who pays attention. From those who do not accept the official narrative without question. From those who understand that where there is silence, there is something too important to be said out loud. And what comes next in the video will show you exactly why they fight so hard to hide it all. It will reveal to you the signs that narrowly escaped, the fragments of truth that slipped through the cracks of censorship. It is now that the investigation enters forbidden territory. It is now that the traces of life on Mars begin to become undeniable. From the moment the Martian dust began to be searched by mechanical eyes from Earth, something became clear. The red planet holds secrets that were not in books, and some of these truths began to slip through the cracks of absolute control. These are real images, released on official NASA websites, but which, for fractions of a second, showed what should not be shown. Structures with perfect angles, too much. Symmetry for something natural. Formations that resemble buried artifacts. Deformed towers. Cliff entrances that don't appear to have been carved by chance. And even stranger, elements with a pattern that refers to technology. Soft curves, apparent connections, subtle metallic reflections. Some of these images disappeared soon after gaining notoriety. Others reappeared with discrete edits, corrected colors, adjusted shadows. But whoever saw it, like this video now. Because this type of content needs to spread. It needs to break the bubble. It needs to reach those who still live under the illusion that we are just exploring the void. This click is not about ego. It is not about algorithm. It's about preventing the truth from continuing to be suffocated in digital silence. One of the most emblematic cases involves an image recorded by the Curiosity probe, where it is possible to identify a formation similar to a head-shaped sculpture. The image was shared on the NASA database, but a few hours later, it was replaced by a new version with lower resolution and no contrast. What once looked like a facial shape now dissolved into some amorphous rock. Coincidence? Many analysts say no. And this was not an isolated case. In another record, what appeared to be a structure with straight lines and almost architectural symmetry was labeled an illusion of pareidolia, the standard justification. But the problem is that the illusions keep emerging, and always in the same regions. Reports from former employees strengthen this suspicion. People who worked on processing Mars data and images say there were strict protocols about what could and could not be released. According to these testimonies, there was an approval chain that passed through military filters. One of them, who remained anonymous for security reasons, revealed that certain images were immediately classified as soon as they showed any unnatural pattern. He also spoke about the existence of an internal database, inaccessible to the public, where problematic images were stored. And the question that remains is not whether there is something there, but rather what exactly they are hiding. Now, breathe and think. If all of this were in the hands of the public, how many truths would have already come to light? The manipulation of shadows in images, the contrasts adjusted to hide suspicious reliefs, the records that appear only for a moment in live broadcasts and then disappear. This is not failure. This is narrative control. This is strategy. And that is precisely why your role is so important at this moment. And the more you see, the clearer it becomes that we're not just talking about rocks and red sand. We are talking about traces of something else, something that at some point was there. Maybe it still is. Organic formations have been recorded more than once. Structures that appear to have a biological texture, as if they were part of a fossilized organism. And these images, like the others, never gain prominence. They are always pushed into the dark corners of the database. They are published without context, without explanation, as if they were irrelevant, but they are not. Anyone who observes carefully knows. Anyone who compares standards recognizes this. And anyone who studies the history of manipulation understands. There are even rumors about a sequence of images that would have captured subtle movement, as if something was moving beneath the surface. The probe would have recorded changes in a specific formation from one day to the next, and when this was identified, the data simply disappeared from the system. The official justification? Communication failure with the sending module. Just one of many generic excuses. And so the truth is hidden, not with lies, but with omissions. If you already suspected this, right here in the comments, the surface is not dead. This phrase is more than a code. It is a mark of someone who sees beyond the layers of dust and silence. Share your view in the comments. Have you ever seen a strange image of Mars that made you question? Have you ever noticed something that didn't seem to fit with the narrative? Your experience could be the missing piece to decipher this puzzle. And the crazy thing is that the more we investigate, the more clues emerge, not just on Mars, but at other points in the solar system. What is being found out there is not random, it's all connected. And in the next part of the video, we'll dive into a revelation that changes everything. The theory that NASA's ultimate goal was never to explore, but to recover. And recover what? You will discover this now, but before that, subscribe to the channel, not for me, for your curiosity, for your conscience. Because this content can be taken down at any time, but if you're subscribed, the truth will always reach you first. Continuing exactly where we left off, we now enter a part that most people don't even know existed. The missions that no one has commented on, those that were not broadcast live, that did not have a press conference, that were simply sent, executed, and erased from public memory. And it is precisely these silent missions that hide some of the most important pieces of the Martian puzzle. While the world was enchanted by images of little rovers strolling through desert valleys, entire probes were launched to regions that were never included in official maps released to the public. Some changed their route after launch without any warning. Others did not even return visible information. But the signs were there, because when something really important is found, silence is often the first response. One of the most emblematic examples, and at the same time most ignored, was the mission Viking Lander in 1976. Almost no one talks about it today, but it was this mission that even before modern technologies touched the surface of Mars with instruments aimed at detecting life. What few people know is that one of the experiments conducted by Viking, called LR, labeled Release Experiment, it gave positive result for biological activity in Martian soil. That's right, in 1976, NASA possibly detected microbial life on Mars. Only, instead of announcing it to the world, the result was discarded as inconclusive on the grounds that it could not be reproduced by other complementary experiments on the same mission. But to this day, many scientists believe that this was the first real contact with extraterrestrial life, and that the decision to stifle the discovery was not technical, it was political. Years later, the scientists responsible for that experiment themselves, such as Dr. Gilbert Levin, publicly stated again that in their analysis, the Viking mission detected life. But of course, these names were deleted from major media outlets, classified as eccentric or outdated. But the most curious thing about all this is that after Viking, no subsequent missions have attempted to directly repeat the same type of biological testing. As if there was an unwritten directive, do not investigate this further. NASA started to focus on analyzing soil, climate, rock composition, always diverting from what really matters, the presence of living organisms. And if you look closely, there's an even more disturbing pattern. Several probes had their trajectories adjusted after launch, redirected to regions with little or no concrete scientific justification. Some were sent to areas that independent experts said had unusual thermal signals, abnormal electromagnetic activity, or even geometric patterns visible from space. But the official report always said the same: change of course for safety, technical failure, target adjustment, and the silence repeated. Furthermore, there are records of orbital missions that captured images and stored them on internal servers, never made publicly available. Third-party technicians involved in data processing have already reported that there were completely non-standard security levels for folders containing records of certain coordinates of Mars. The files existed, but they could not be accessed even by engineers with years of experience. All of this raises an inevitable but even more powerful question. Maybe NASA not just be exploring Mars, but protecting something that has already been found there. And at this point, it's no longer possible to pretend that it's all a coincidence. An experiment that detects biological activity is ignored. Missions change route without explanation. Images disappear. Information is classified. And all of this is labeled as part of the scientific process. But what is actually being analyzed is hidden from you. Because if the truth comes out, everything changes. Science changes, the story changes, humanity changes. And you know something like that wouldn't be released easily. Subscribe to the channel now, because this is not just about revealing content. This is a way to support this type of investigation, to ensure that more people have access to what is being silenced. It's positioning. It's proof that you are not content with the pasteurized version of reality. What begins to emerge behind the silent missions and classified files is something even more disturbing. The existence of a subtle but extremely effective mechanism for silencing voices within science itself. We are talking about high-level researchers, engineers with decades of work at NASA, Scientists linked to JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who at some point dared to cross the line of what can or cannot be said in public. We're not talking about conspiracy theorists or random internet channels. We are talking about professionals with credentials, history, and direct involvement in space projects. And all of them, when they touch on the topic extraterrestrial life on Mars, seem to encounter the same obstacle, the silencing effect. This effect is not presented explicitly. There are no threatening meetings or direct communications. It appears in cuts of interviews, in conferences whose videos disappear, in publications that do not undergo review and are never approved to circulate in academic circles. One of the most emblematic cases occurred in 2001, when an interview with a former NASA scientist was published on a small American broadcaster. During the conversation, he mentioned that, during a previous mission to Curiosity, organic compounds with a structure analogous to microorganisms were detected. The video quickly went viral on forums and alternative research groups. 3 days later, the channel removed the content from the air. The original video is gone. The channel claimed copyright issues, but the interviewee never appeared in public again. Another example is that of a JPL software engineer who, during a technical conference, accidentally presented a sequence of Martian images with filters adjusted to capture thermal emissions. One of these images revealed a region with intense activity below the surface. Something was generating heat in an area where there was supposed to be absolutely nothing. The reaction of the organizing team was immediate. The conference broadcast was cut off live. The excerpt simply disappeared from the official recording, and this engineer, he never appeared as a speaker at agency events again. And if you think this is an exaggeration, think about how many professionals left NASA and never said anything. People who participated in historic projects, who lived within the corridors of spatial truth, and who never spoke out openly. This is no coincidence. This is control. It is the certainty that there are consequences. There are scientists who, upon retiring, began to release encrypted statements, as if they were trying to circumvent the system with phrases that only those who are attentive can interpret. One of these phrases, said by a former consultant in the astrobiology division, echoes to this day. What we cannot announce is exactly what we confirm. And here comes the most critical point of all this: institutionalized fear. There are reports of researchers who, after trying to publish articles that suggested the presence of biological molecules in samples of Martian soil, received unexpected visits from security consultants, people who did not belong to NASA or the university where the study was conducted. These visits were accompanied by a subtle but clear message. This is not the time for this type of discovery. This type of science, contrary to what is expected, is not welcome. This pattern is repeated at events, symposiums, and even TED Talks. Yes, there was a documented case where a presentation on simulations of early life on Mars was cut in the final curation phase, even though it was initially approved. The content was based on real experiments, with data from previous missions, but according to the organizers, it touched on topics that could be misinterpreted. And then you understand that it's not just about what was found, but about what you are allowed to know. What if what we fear most, or most desire, has already happened without anyone telling the truth? At this point in the investigation, the simple hypothesis of life on Mars is no longer bold. What really challenges us now is to think, what if there has already been contact? Not with microorganisms, not with particles, but with intelligence, with presence, with something he silently responded. From the first robotic forays, NASA engineers knew that Mars was not as quiet as they had hoped. Internal reports mention the record of unusual radio signals, unnatural frequency pulses detected by probes and moving vehicles, sounds recorded by experimental microphones, intermittent whispers, repetitive pops, reverberations that seemed out of place in time, and the official explanation, electromagnetic noise, always the same argument. But some of these frequencies have already been analyzed by independent researchers and revealed rhythmic patterns with regular intervals and a structure similar to known languages. It wasn't just noise, it was a sign, and the signs didn't come alone. Some regions of Mars have been marked as restricted access zones, even on a supposedly uninhabited planet. Areas where rovers have been remotely shut down, places where contact with vehicles was suddenly interrupted. as if they had crossed an invisible barrier. There are technical records of 2 robots that entered deep craters and mysteriously stopped transmitting. The exact location of these robots has been hidden from public reporting. Officially, they were damaged. But among the engineers who worked on these missions, there is another term, coordinated blackout. And the images of these regions, leaked images, show geometric formations in the Martian subsoil, tunnels, caves, narrow passages with patterns that resemble architecture, pillars, straight lines, and even compartments with perfect symmetry. All of this documented on infrared and ground-penetrating radar. But what was released to the public? Only external, edited, low-resolution images. Nothing that can confirm that there is something artificial there. But there is. One of these tunnels was investigated by a probe in 2013. The equipment would have partially entered a narrow crack and shortly after sent a set of uncatalogued noises, followed by a failure in the optical system. The following: images were completely distorted, as if something had directly interfered with the transmission. The official response was thermal defect in the camera, but former employees stated that on that same day, an internal safety protocol was implemented, generally only used in situations of biological risk or the presence of unknown materials. This brings us to the theory that many consider the most dangerous of all, that NASA has already found traces of intelligent life on Mars and has initiated, at some level, indirect contact. And this contact was not made by astronauts or diplomats, but by machines. Rovers sent to explore and collect data, which ended up activating or invading forbidden, perhaps even sacred, sites of a civilization that remained hidden for eons. And when that happened, the answer came not in words, but in silence, blackout, and censorship. You begin to realize that the script for these missions is always the same. Something strange happens. The data disappears. The person responsible remains silent, and the story is buried under cold technical reports. But now the truth begins to break free from its bonds, because there are people who have seen too much, people who listened to internal recordings, people who worked on decoding these signals. And the most impressive part of these signs is still stored in scientific databases, encrypted and with restricted access. But copies circulated, fragments were distributed, and what has been decoded so far points to just one thing: active intelligence. If this all resonates with something you've always suspected, write it here in the comments. They responded and hid. This phrase marks those who are seeing beyond the veil, those who understand that silence is also a response, and perhaps the scariest of all. Share here. Do you believe there has already been contact on Mars? That the signals have already been received and suppressed? Your opinion could trigger a new wave of collective investigation. And right now, as these words echo, more data may be being hidden. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, that needs to change now. Because what comes in the next part of the video is the beginning of the end of doubts. Concrete evidence of buried structures, unnatural construction patterns and signs that cannot be explained with geology. And you need to be here when it comes out, because what we're unearthing may not be from our world. So now that everything has been exposed, now that every piece has been precisely fitted together, it becomes impossible to ignore what is before us. Over the decades, while the headlines spoke of dust, craters and theories still in the study phase, the signs were all there. Deleted images, experiments discarded, silenced scientists, diverted missions, signals ignored. It's no longer a question of possibility, it's a question of time. And not the time when NASA will reveal it, but the time when more people will understand what really happened. Because perhaps the most important discovery in the history of humanity has already been made. But we, those who support this civilization with our beliefs, our dreams and our faith in science, were the last to know what changed everything. And perhaps the explanation lies in this cosmic silence, in this unspoken agreement between governments, institutions and agencies. A truth so gigantic, so transformative, that it could only be kept like this, muffled, fractionated, disguised. Because admitting the existence of intelligent life on Mars would be admitting that we are no longer alone, and that we never have been. And that changes absolutely everything. Now leave your like. This is more than supporting a video. It is strengthening a current of consciousness that can no longer be stopped. It is to ensure that this truth continues to echo through the layers of censorship. And comment below, "The truth is already on Mars." This phrase is the code of those who already understood, from those who no longer need proof but continuity. Write it in the comments and add your voice to those who are also waking up. And of course, subscribe to the channel now, because the next videos will take this investigation even further. And you need to be among the first to know what else is being hidden before it disappears. Now watch the next video that appears on your screen, because what was revealed today is just the surface of something even deeper. The discovery has already been made, it just wasn't revealed.